It doesn't matter whether you like the person of Akweke, for instance. I don't like the person of Akweke, but anything she releases tomorrow, I will read it because she has the craft.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to an evening with news. Episode, and we are also excited again to announce that we have something different for you this evening, different from what you saw in the first episode. And here now, I'll introduce our guest for the evening, Mr. Ogochukwu Ukwueze.
It's not a woman, it's me. I'm Ogochukwu.
Good evening and welcome, sir, to an evening.
Thank you.
So this evening we'll be discussing African literature. I remember our last episode, it was a whole back and forth of a lot of drama, a lot of chaos, good chaos anyway, of the books that we like, the books that made us cry, the books that made us cringe. And it was very versatile, and we talked about different books from different countries and different people and how they wrote it. So now today we are going to be focused on African literature. What is African literature? How far has African literature gone? Has it made an impact in the world? And what is African literature to you? So our guest, Mr. Albert, I'll be asking you first. What exactly do you think, or would you say that African literature is, especially to you? What is it to you?
Now I have to say something. I feel like this is you coming back at me after giving you an exam, right?
No, please.
Yeah, well,
No,
okay.
no,
Okay.
please.
No problem. I will try. African literature is many things to many people. Of course, the controversies, the debates surrounding it hasn't ended yet. Uh, and it's about whether it is based on authors' uh, provenance, that is where the author comes from, or the language, and the third option, uh, the story. So there is the debate is about whether African literature could be defined by where the author is coming from, such as uh, such as that if the author is African, whatever they write is to be considered African literature. Now there is also the school of thought that have something against this, and this is because they think that some writers of African descent may write things that may not be considered African in terms of the content of the story. If you read, what's her name again? Uh, uh, the the writer of the death of the Black, what's her name again? Akweke. If you read Akweke's It Made a Fool of Death, you would observe that there is rarely anything African about the story. Only that perhaps there is a Nigerian character, a Nigerian diaspora character. So, for some people who are strictly of the opinion that the African book must tell African story, that may not count as African literature. Then, those who claim that it is about the language are at the extreme of the debate because they claim that if you write in English, you are less African. I mean, the text, the book is less African. The argument is that English is not traditionally African. But one of the criticisms against this position is that the English language has been domiciled, it has been domesticated, such that English has become part of African culture. And as such, anybody who writes in English language is still doing African literature and even discussing African life. And that's exactly what Achebe stands for when he speaks about doing the hand of ahead of things with the English language. Part of his way of arguing for the use of English for African texts is that we take the English and do ahead of things with it. Yeah, and that's so much because I remember somewhere in Hour of God or Things Fall Apart. I'm trying to remember which of the text he wrote something. There is someone is telling the son. I think one of the mothers in either of the story is telling the son, "Let me not see you carry yesterday's body to. Let me not see you carry yesterday's body. Yesterday's body is not anything that an Englishman would easily make sense of. Yesterday's body. What is yesterday's body? But this is, I suppose, what he actually means by doing unheard of things with English language, because the white man may not get yesterday body. There are two English words. Yeah, there are two English words. But the way they've been fused makes it a different thing altogether. Right. Then that other position, that's for people who think it's about the content of the story. They also have a point because it's a question of the story you've told, whose story. Now, the problem with this position is that when non-African people write about Africa, our lives in Africa, would we then consider that as part of African culture? So, none of these positions seem to have attained, if you like, a preferred outlook among scholars. So, the best you can have is to know these, and maybe you make your personal opinion. And my personal opinion about it is that African literature is first and foremost literature by an African. That's my personal opinion, even when I know all this. Did I try?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Ogochukwu. What you said was beautiful and as well as striking. I picked something very spectacular from what he said. 3 points where he said that African literature should and focus or it ventures into 3 points where we look at the background of the writer, the language, and the story, the material that the literature, whatever you're reading as African literature carries, be poetry, fiction, drama, and it is amazing to see that one continent, one set of people have so much to pass in everything that they write and every day. And I believe that is why there's a lot of debate on what African literature is. So to our editor in chief, I would like you to, maybe just from what Mr. Ogochukwu said, let me know what is African literature to you, because it's something personal from what he said. There are many things, but then to him it is literature written by an African artist. It could be something different. So let's hear it.
Okay, before I say what I think of African literature, I have a concern though from what he said that there are a lot of things on the definition of African literature. So my concern is because when we look at what we call American literature, it has there is something we're looking at, and then there are like a range of works described as American literature. Then when you go to Italian literature, English literature, it's the same thing. But when we come to African literature, we fail to have a definition that everybody concurs to. Yeah. So I'm really worried. Why does Africa as a continent does have no standard definition for their literature, whereas other continents do?
This is a difficult question, but let me put out a disclaimer. Everything I'm saying is personal.
Yeah, of course.
These are my personal opinions. So, see, the what I think is a problem around here is politics. We have politicized so many things, including creativity, right? The you mentioned the literatures of other cultures, right? I will give you something to consider. Joseph Conrad, you consider him as, in fact, he is considered one of the foremost English writers, right? But Joseph Conrad is not English. Same with Eliot. Same with a number of other writers that are considered English and people that we read as English literature. Now, if you go, if you pick, forgotten the exact volume of the Northern Anthology of English Literature, you find that everywhere. Northern Anthology of English Literature. You'll find Achebe, you'll find Shoyinka,
Yes.
you'll find some of these other African writers. The problem, I don't know if I should call it a problem. They understand that these people, there is something, these writings, they share something that is English, and that one is the language. You get now? That is on the basis of language. But the question of African literature, the politics, starting with the fact that there is no one African language, right? So it is hard to now say that we can define our own literature on the basis of language. So that is why it becomes politicized, such that those few people like Ngugi who are insisting that it should be about language, they are not out of point, right? That's why you have to recognize all the positions. Because some other literature, Spanish literature, for instance, there's nothing else Spanish about it other than the language, right? And the literatures of so many other cultures. So, because in our African environment, this is hard. This is hard. So, we are now looking at, is it when it tells about African lives, or when it tells about when it is an African that has written it, or when the language is an African language. So that makes it a very difficult case, unlike what we find. Although you mentioned America. Now, in the case of America, America has a very unique history. And the things you study do not necessarily feature everything that should be considered part of American literature. So there is something called representative writings, and that's exactly what people are often exposed to, right? Yeah, and you may also be shocked to see that in the study of American and African American writers, some people of other continents and countries that are not American, that because they've naturalized, their works may be featured in the syllable, the syllable, right, of American literature out there. So ours is so politicized that you may be surprised. There are people, when you mention Ben Okri in the discussion of African literature, they frown.
Yes. Yeah.
They frown, and why Ben Okri and all. So it's more of politics than real context. I mean, context of the work. But that's why I say, as a person, what you define it as, that's what it is. If I'm to study African literature, any author who is of African literature comes up. And then when I want to go broader, I will now want to see what have other people, non-Africans, written about Africa. That's what I think. I'm not even sure I answered your question.
In a way, yeah, because the question actually raised more debate. So, So do we have like, can we link this problem to our colonial history? Because okay, let's just say that the pioneers or the first generation of African writers actually they, they resisted colonialism in their writing. So and then they had this collective peace. They have this thematic preoccupation that they battled or they tackled in their writing. So do we say that after them we became confused?
No, the truth we have got to acknowledge, even though African is always undermined, or let me give them that benefit of the doubt, often undermined, is that literature, as we know it today, is actually a colonial legacy. It is something that we learned that may not have begun without colonialism for two reasons. The idea of written literature, writing, as per to compose literature the way we know it today, is something bequeathed. It's not supposed to be bequeathed, but something we learned from the colonialists, right? That is one. Then the inspiring force is largely the colonial encounter, an attempt to challenge, to counter the narrative. So on these two bases, it's more or less a colonial legacy. But even then, that was when the debate, because the Berlin Conference had this debate of defining African literature. Yes, it has always been there, right? So it is not a today thing. The confusion has always been there. Only that people took their different. Like you heard of Bullet Jeka critic. They have the criticism. It's even now that the tone has subsided and it became less of a direct attack. Then you write, another writes to respond to you. So now we are more focused on surviving. Anything that puts money on your table. Right, that's what I.
But I was thinking, over time, it's meant to like evolve. Not meant to like evolve.
The form that
Yes,
it's learned
bound
from.
to evolve because technology evolves, everything evolves. The world does based on evolution. So it's bound to evolve.
Yes, I mean literature is even more daring than any other thing you can think of.
Actually,
So if you speak of evolution, literature makes itself. But it's a working evolution, only that it doesn't work. In terms of evolution, it's always there. But because we in the humanities, there is need for capturing the history of anything we are dealing with. So we need to be aware of the forms as they were, and also get to know them as they emerge. At the time I entered the Department of English as a student, I didn't know what flash fiction was. I didn't know at the time I entered, I didn't know there was anything like flash fiction until along the line. And I think the first ever flash fiction published in the Muse was in the what is it called? In the 44th edition. The edition edited by not edited by that's his first time live fiction featured. So and that's the evolution you are talking about. And today you can hardly, it is very hard to define poetry, for instance, or the lyric form by the older definition, because there has been a lot of experimentations and what I may call mix of forms today. So what we have got to our task as critics is to identify and preserve these forms. People have identified and preserved the forms that we are looking at now. So any new form we see today, we identify it and make sure it is preserved. So if you relax and say this is not it, this is not,
You don't have pressure to
the creativity does not wait to be what life used to be. So identify, okay, this one is new. You characterize it. What does how do we know it from the other things? Then you preserve it. That's your job. That's your job. So we are not averse. We are not running away from that evolution. It should evolve. It should.
Wow. Wow, this has been awesome. I don't know if you notice, I've just been staring and listening. And it's like I don't want to say anything more. I just want to listen, I just want to hear more. So it is amazing to see that this continent, this Africa, these people have such vastness, and there is always the debate, be it politics, be it whatever it is. Just know that Africans ate for I tried. So, but then yes, Africans get teased. But then I have should I call it a question, or I just have something, because for me, I really believe that for me, like you say, it's personal. African literature to me and for me is literature, of course, by Africans that understand the African experience.
Wow.
That yes, that can portray that African experience, not just the regular tropes. Oh, an African man traveled out, had a different family, and he died, and the family came back. That is
That's
very
picture too.
that is picture, but sometimes it is so limited. Or the African person that gets scholarship and goes outside the country and falls in love.
They are calling them one.
Yes, it's so tiring, and I really feel, and I put it to the house too. I feel that there are still African writers or writers that wish to portray the African experience, but are not really getting it in the ways they should.
How do you mean getting it?
Getting it in the sense, it's as if what they write or what they put out there is just focused in one place. There's just like it's not. It's just so limited. It's like you read this and all Africans are like this or should be like this. There are books out there that are like that. Many books that say that African men said it. And it's like, I read this book. Yes, there are people like that.
About cliches.
Yes,
But then,
I feel like the African experience can be subjective. The
Of
way you
course.
see Africa,
Yeah.
it
Maybe,
can
maybe,
be
like,
not, it might not be the way someone else sees Africa. For example, I might have seen Africa as this place that people are just wicked and people are suffering, and we have to fight against the government. So I just write this book, and then you read it. You have seen Africa from another perspective, and then you read it, and you are not even getting what I'm saying. You are like, what is this? This is not my Africa.
I really
like women, the place of women, it has been written over and over.
Yeah.
Like people have been writing about the place
But
of
there's something I want to understand. Do you guys expect to see every possibility in one story? Like everything that can be African in one story?
do you choose?
If one story captures
Like it should have coloniality.
it mustn't even have coloniality.
You should have
No, it's not even about.
The truth is that
I mean they cried every now.
there are other things that influence the way what people write about. There are stories that you have never heard of,
Yeah.
right? And most of them are not heard of, not because they are not story enough, but because they didn't identify with the wave, with what people want to read at the time, right? So they may be swallowed up by the wave. So, and there is a lot of gatekeeping that happens these days. You want to you want to throw in your work to some of these publishers that publish freely, you win your space with them.
Yeah.
Some of them determine the kinds of things people write by having a focus. This is what they want to publish at this time. So because you want to get published, you just want to tell that story. So there you are. So some of these, there are some writings that you never. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Oyuman of Obange, for instance, by what's his name? No, not really. John Munoye. John Munoye. So and these writings, there is another Seyi Adigun that writes strong poetry. I once reviewed one of his collections around 2017. Strong poetry, but because he doesn't write the kind of thing that I identify with any of the running themes in the world. So nobody listens to
writers are writing with agenda. I want to write about oppression. I'll send it to this
magazine. People just so, but that's actually unfortunate. That's unfortunate, and because sometimes we read the things that are already identified. Maybe because they were shortlisted in one prize, and then we say, okay, let us read this person. So that's also conditions, just not just the writers, but also the readers. There are people who write, but you don't know them. So how do you know them if someone didn't raise their work because they have conformed to a certain thing that those people? So these are some of the issues, right? And that's exactly why all of you here, should start.
All of you people.
All of you. You start reading these people that are not heard of and reviewing them, putting let people hear about their work. People that this person has something to offer.
Like me now.
Like you now. Like, I mean, with all her steeds and composure.
I don't want to retain my steeds.
You see, so let people go in there, read works, any work that struck you, review and put out there for people to.
Thank you so much. So it's just like we rise by lifting others kind of thing. Okay, so thank you so much, because this is eye-opening, and that it's telling, and it's like you can see Africa, or you should see Africa from your perspective and also see it from another's perspective. And I really stand to be corrected about that limiting thing, because I didn't really understand. It got tiring seeing the same things over and over again. So I put it to you out there: if you're writing something, don't be, just put it out. Don't be shy, let people review you, and just be you, express the African in you. So I'm going to leave the house open.
I have an observation. Yeah, because when you go to Twitter and you follow some of these Twitter critics, like what's his name again, NS Tokuyemi. You see that there is a lot of tackling, there is a lot of aggression against writers or poets who don't do it well. We said this. So my point is, like you said, sir, we should read and review these people who are coming up, because maybe they have this nuances about in their writing. So, okay, just like the Twitter critics are doing, or like they are doing, can we just pardon these maybe these flaws these people make in their writing just because we want them to come up and
No, I am not saying you should look down on the things that don't, that is not what it should be. See, there is no bad publicity. That's one. There is no bad publicity. So if Ogochukwu wrote very poorly of in the name of the Father, by what's his name again? You're right. Very bad review of that work. And honestly, Ugochukwu picked it from my office. I have tried and tried to read. I couldn't read beyond the 10th page. I tried and tried. When I told him, he said he will force himself to finish it and then do the review. He did. And now the review got out there, and the author reached out to him and wanted to get to know what he saw. And then after the interaction, the author promised him that the work he will put out soon, that he will see a difference. And the author eventually published a new book. Trying to remember the title. The new book is out, and he bought the logistics. He sent down to go to read, and he read and he commented. He gave me feedback and said, "This is better." You see, so the one he wrote may have moved someone to go and confirm that,
Yes.
okay, is it this bad? Let me check. Right? So some of these small, for instance, I was on Twitter this morning, and someone is comparing Things Fall Apart to one story, the one story that was published in, I think, 2014, and which was a PhD work of that author. So because of that attempt to make that comparison, it led me to go and look up who is this person, and then I saw all the author's other works, and I'm considering now to see if I could read one of her works. So these are, if there is anything bad about the work, identify it. Say it. Someone may go ahead. It's a feedback, and it's also publicity. Someone will now go and pick it and be like, "Oh, is it this? Let me see." But let your criticism, let your review be balanced and be honest. What's his name? Ernest. What Ernest does is the kind of thing that the what are they called? Critics we are doing. They don't care about the modesty. They just want to say how they feel about the work, and that one is personal, right? Ernest is well read, right? I respect that he is well read. However, he seems to be more sentimental than being. There is something Matthew Arnold said about criticism.
Exactly. And hope.
Matthew Arnold said that it is a disinterested endeavor. Disinterested endeavor. So if it is disinterested, it means that you don't put your sentiment in it. You remove
Attach and detach.
Yeah, so you just try to say things as they are there. It doesn't matter whether you like the person of Akweke, for instance. I don't like the person of Akweke, but anything she releases tomorrow, I will read it because she has a craft. She has what she crafts great stories. So whether I like her, I don't. It's none of my business. Once she releases another story, I will go and read it because she writes well. So make your criticism as objective as possible.
Subjective.
Objective.
Wow. Yes.
Wow.
Because I am wow.
Use wow with me.
Because I
You're wild.
am like I don't even know the next thing to say. But then this is all we've said. Perspective matters,
Yeah.
and read. See what others have to say. Because if maybe you've been reading a particular line, it will limit what you know about these people, this kind of literature. So look out, yes, be open-minded, look out for other people, know what they have to say, broaden your scope, your horizon, whatever, and embrace whatever you see. And criticize without sentiment.
Drink beer.
And forget about
And maintain your steez. Don't forget.
and also forget about the pain, the torment, and the
Torture.
Thank you so much for joining us in the second episode of An Evening with Muse. This has been a wonderful ride, and we say a big thank you to our guest, Mr. Ogochukwu Ukwueze. Thank you for having us and thank you for answering all the questions that we had for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment and ask your questions if you have something to say. So yes, and share. So this is from the Muse to you. Have a good evening. Thank you.